question, Senator Graham.
Well, I think that's a good way to begin. I couldn't agree with you more. The goal is to destroy ISIL and all they represent. Is that correct?
It is.
Very briefly, describe what destroying ISIL would look like, General Dempsey.
Yeah, I'm probably going to be a little more articulate about that in Iraq because we've got a partner and we've got a credible ground force to enable. Defeating or destroying ISIL in Iraq will require the combined forces of ISF and PESH to go offensive, to regain lost territory, while concurrently, and this is the important part, the government of Iraq fills in behind with inclusive policies addressing, you're well familiar with the complaints of the Kurds. And
can we just maybe speed up?
And then we restore the border, and then they're defeated.
No, I'm with you. You take all the territory they hold. You take Mosul and Fallujah away from them. You put an Iraqi military on the ground that will be loyal to the Iraqi people, not just to the Shias. You have an inclusive government in Baghdad where the Sunni tribes will feel like they're better off playing politics in Baghdad than siding with ISIL. That's destroying their ability to regenerate in Iraq. Syria we'll talk about in a minute, but I want to continue the theme about why all this matters. Is there any doubt in your mind, each of you, that if ISIL had the capability to kill millions of Americans, they would do so?
There's no doubt in my mind. They'll kill anybody who doesn't conform to their narrow ideological bent.
I agree.
So really it's mankind against ISIL. It's just not us against ISIL or Sunni Arab states against ISIL. If you're a Christian in the region, they will kill you very quickly. Is that correct?
Unless you convert.
Okay. Now, I guess what I'm trying to persuade my colleagues that these problems only get worse over time, but are they limited to the Mideast? Are they radical Islamists that we should worry about in Africa?
Absolutely.
Does the authorization to use military force allow this administration to go in to attack AQIP in Yemen without a new authorization?
It does. Anything affiliated with AQ.
Okay. I'm going to write you a letter and name the organization that we could not attack without a new AUMF. I just want to see how far this goes. I'm a very robust Article 2 guy, but I think this is a pretty robust reading of the current AUMF, but I'm not going to stand in your way. We need to get this right. Now, areas of agreement. Training the Free Syrian Army, you recommend we do that with all of the complications that go with it?
And with a coalition, I do.
Okay. So now let's get to Syria. To destroy ISIL, if 2/3 of ISIL's in Syria, do you agree that somebody's got to go in on the ground and dig them out eventually?
Somebody.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And it's better for us to be part of that somebody than just to be the only ones doing it.
Absolutely.
Can you think of an Arab army that you could form in the next year that you would have confidence that could go in and destroy ISIL in Syria, hold the territory without substantial American support?
There are partners in the region that have very capable special operating forces, and I think the campaign would envision that they would participate. That would certainly be our ask of them to participate in a ground campaign.
My question is, can you envision a coalition of Arab states that have the capabilities to go into Syria, defeat ISIL, hold the territory without substantial U.S. military support?
As long as, Senator, you'll elaborate on what you mean by substantial U.S. military support.
Getting them to the battlefield. How do they get there? What does it take to maintain a large army in the field? Do they have the intelligence capability if we don't help them? Do they have sufficient air power to win the day with our support? Do they have the special forces capabilities to go and kill the leaders of ISIL without us being on the ground?
Well, I was with you until without us being on the ground, because as I mentioned in previous testimony...
Well, it's easy. If you think they can do it without us being on the ground, just say yes.
Yes.
Okay. What if they lose?
Any campaign is built on assumptions. I just made one. And if the assumption proves invalid, then you have to readjust.
What's the consequences of an Arab army going into Syria virtually on their own and getting beat by ISIL to us?
Yeah, I wouldn't suggest virtue on your own. I think there'll be enabling support that
By
we
us?
would have. Yeah, I do think, yes.
Okay, well, we're having a semantic problem here, but the bottom line is, what does it mean to the world if we take on ISIL and they defeat the people we send in to take them on? That's a bad day for us. Do you agree?
It's a bad day for the region. Yes, sir.
Bad day for the world, isn't it?
It is.
Do you agree with me this is probably our last best chance to put these guys in a box and keep them there?
I think it's our last best chance to convince regional governments that if they don't solve their internal problems, we can't do it for them, and they better get serious about it.
What if the following happens? The regional players say that I don't trust the United States because you've been so unreliable. You have drawn red lines and done nothing. You withdrew from Iraq and left the place in shambles. That I really don't want to follow your leadership because I don't think you're capable of winning the war because you don't have the resolve. What if they tell us we're not going to do anything other than maybe drop a few bombs? Would you consider the recommendation to the President that allowing ISIL to maintain a safe haven in Syria and to grow in capability over time is a major threat to the United States? Could you envision yourself recommending to the President, if nobody else will help us, that we go in on the ground and clean these guys out in Syria? If we had to.
Yeah, I haven't confronted that question yet, Senator, but I'll react to it. I don't think that even if we were to go in and on the ground, armored divisions with flags furled,
the full weight of the military,
I don't think we would do anything more than push this problem further to the right. This has got to be, to your point, if we don't get the kind of coalition I'm describing, then we're into a very narrow CT framework, in my view.
Okay, if I may just follow this point. So our national defense, in terms of stopping ISIL from killing thousands or millions of Americans if they get the capability, really comes down to whether or not we can convince the Arab world to go in there and defeat these guys?
It really comes down to building a coalition so that what the Arab Muslim world sees is them rejecting ISIS, not us.
They already
defeating them.
reject ISIL. Do you know any major Arab ally that embraces ISIL?
I know major Arab allies who fund them.
Yeah, but did they embrace that? They fund them because the Free Syrian Army couldn't fight Assad. They were trying to beat Assad. I think they realized the folly of their ways. Let's don't taint the Mideast unfairly. Is it fair to say that most Syrians have two things in common? They don't like ISIL and they don't like Assad. Most Syrians.
I agree.
Is it fair to say that most Muslims reject what ISIL does in the name of their religion?
Yes.
Is it fair to say that if we don't contain this threat and eventually destroy it, that it gets worse over time, and a year from now, if they're still flourishing in Syria and this coalition hadn't come about, America's more in danger of a major attack than we are today?
Yes.
Thank you.